Josephus writes of a closed canon of 22 books, not including the Book of Enoch, but he would have spelled canon correctly. This is the book that he writes about it in. It's called Against Appian 1, Book 1. Again, I've linked this, I hope, in the description, because everyone is not permitted of his own accord to be a writer, nor is there any disagreement in what is written, they being only prophets that have written the original and eldest accounts of things. So he's not saying they're only prophets who've written these things. He's saying the only people who've written these things were prophets. As they learned them of God himself by inspiration. Others have written what hath appeared, what hath happened in their own times, and in a very distinct manner also. For we have not an innumerable multitude of books among us, disagreeing from and contradicting one another, as the Greeks have. So he says, listen, our books, no contradictions in them. They don't argue against each other. It's not like the works that the Greeks hold sacred. They're all contradictory. Only 22 books, he says, which contain the records of all past times, which are justly believed to be divine. And of them, so he said there's 22 of them. Now he's going to tell us what these 22 are. He says, of them, 5 belong to Moses, which contain his laws, and the traditions of the origin of mankind till his death. This interval of time was little short of 3,000 years. But as to the time from the death of Moses till the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, who reigned after Xerxes, the prophets who were after Moses wrote down what was done in their times, 13 books. 5 of Moses up until Moses' death. From then until Artaxerxes, the prophets cover that period of time. The remaining 4 books contain hymns to God, precepts for the conduct of human life. 'Tis true our history hath been written since Artaxerxes, very particularly, but hath not been esteemed of the like authority. So you're talking about the Apocrypha there, Maccabees and things like that. With the former by our forefathers, because there hath not been an exact succession of the prophets since that time. And how firmly we have given credit to these books of our own nation is evident by what we do. For during so many ages as have already passed, no one has been so bold so as to add anything to them, to take anything from them, or to make any change in them. But it has become natural to all Jews immediately and from their very birth to esteem these books which contain divine doctrines, to persist in them, and if occasion be, willingly to die for them. So what he describes is, he says, these are the books that the Jews hold as sacred, hold as inspired. Of them, 5 are of Moses. The other ones go from the death of Moses onwards, so that's not before the flood. They're the prophets, and then you've got 4 of hymns and other such writings. So he is saying that the Jews have a canon, which is 22 books, and it doesn't include Enoch. There are 24 books in the current Jewish canon instead of the 22 mentioned by Josephus. Some scholars have suggested that he considered Ruth part of Judges, Lamentations part of Jeremiah. Other scholars suggest that at the time he wrote, such books as Esther and Ecclesiastes were not yet considered canonical. So, the canon, the Jewish canon, has possibly expanded. And I include this very simply to make the point, who cares what Josephus said? Who cares what the Jews thought were canon? It has no kind of relevance as to whether Enoch is scripture, whether Enoch's inspired. He did. I'm examining the evidence for the argument. Josephus in his 22-book canon by Steve Mason, again included in the description. In the ongoing debate over the shape of the first century Jewish canon, this passage must be dealt with by those who argue for any of the positions on the table, whether the canon was closed or still open in the late first century, and whether it was in 3 divisions, corresponding to the later rabbinic scheme of Torah, prophets, and the writings in 24 volumes, or in 2, the law and the prophets. I include this because there's been a video that's been made recently that has been arguing against the Book of Enoch, and the point was made, well, Josephus said there was the law, the prophets, and the writings. There were 3 of them. What I want to show you is from the very same writing, you can make the argument either that Josephus says there was 3 divisions or that there was 2. Okay, not surprisingly, Josephus tends to support the scholar who's making the argument. In other words, the scholar who's making the argument is going to take something from Josephus to support what he says and ignore the rest. For example, S. Lyman avers from Josephus' statement, it is evident that he recognized a tripartite canon. This guy, however, contends that it's tripartite. Such evidence as we have from Hellenistic Judaism thus confirms the essentially bipartite character of Scripture. So whoever wants to argue whatever from Josephus, they're able to. Like I say, who cares what Josephus says ultimately? So as a factual basis, is this what Josephus says? There is a closed canon of 22 books, or there is a canon of 22 books which does not include the Book of Enoch. 10 out of 10. Absolutely what he said. So whether or not it's an argument that we should accept as to not including the Book of Enoch in Scripture, it's a fat 0. It's obviously 0. Who cares what the Jews thought was Scripture? The question is it Scripture?